Right, today we're going to study a very interesting topic of a group of young monks, not so well known as the famous arahats, but nevertheless they appear very early in the life of the Buddha. In fact, very soon after the teaching of the first discourse, that is, the 30 friends or 30 young men, different names are given to them, and the study begins on page 96. Interestingly, we have quite a few documents, where at least four texts recounting the story of how these 30 young men became monks and then became arahats. So, in fact, we have two accounts from the Vinaya, one from the Dhammapada commentary, and the key sutta, which is from the Samyutta Nikaya. If you look at the top of page 96, the title is Timsa Bhikkhu Sutta. Timsa is 30, Bhikkhu, of course, monks, Sutta is discourse. The discourse on the 30 monks as 15.13. The sutta is also called Timsa Bhikkhu Sutta, the discourse on the 30 or so monks. This word matta is often used in numbers. They kind of refer more or less. That's the meaning here. So there are lots of introduction stuff here which you can read on your own. I'm going to go straight into the first story, which is on page 99, section 2, the 30 Pawa monks. Now, according to the story here, is from the Mahavagga, section 1, part 4, Vinaya, volume 1, and that section has been titled as the Baddha Waggiya Sahayaka Watu. Baddha means fortunate, noble, good qualities, Bhadra in Sanskrit. Waggiya means group. Wagga is group. Waggiya means those belonging to a group. Sahayaka, friends. In fact, the word Sahaya also means friend. Watu means story. So this is the story of the fortunate group of 30 friends. The story starts off by locating the Buddha in Benares soon after the teaching of the first discourse, and it's not far from Guruvela. So I suppose we can say this story is also located in that area, because sometimes the place where the Buddha is located and the location of the story are quite different places, but today in this text there's no mention that the 30 young men are anywhere else, so it probably will be somewhere nearby, near Benares. So the story goes that these 30 young men, they were rich kids, and 29 of them were married, so they brought their wives along to the park to enjoy probably sort of a holiday. One of them is not married, so he brings along a social escort. As the story goes, the social escort, she was not very honest, so while all these young people were enjoying themselves, she stole the belongings and absconded and ran away. So the other 20, the person who lost his clothes, of course, was very troubled, and the other 39 friends, they all got together and started looking around for this woman, the thief. And so this is where the story begins. There is this movement of people, and the Buddha is waiting, so to speak, for them, sitting under a tree. The Buddha very often would sit under a tree waiting for the right time for someone to come along. Or sometimes he would himself go up to this person or a group of people and talk to them about Dharma. So here these 30 young men were kind of wandering around looking for this woman who stole their variables. So they met the Buddha. I mean, well, we're talking about a park here. There are not too many people there. So here's a very peaceful man sitting under a tree. So the young man politely goes up to the Buddha and asks the Buddha, "Have you seen a woman passing by?" This is where, when you ask the Buddha a question, number one, he's not going to answer your question right away. He's going to give you a Dharma answer. That's all he talks about, nothing but Dharma. So the conversation begins in section 3. So now this is the Buddha's response to the young man's question, "Have you seen a woman passing this way?" And the Buddha asks, in Pali it says, "Tanking manyata wo kumara." So he addressed themselves as young men, or even Kumara can translate as boys. Even. So they're quite young, probably teenagers, late teenagers. "What do you think, young men? Or what do you think, boys, even? Which is better for you? Katamang wo ko tumhakan warang." The third word, there should be kecho, there's no W there. That you were to seek a woman, or you were to seek the self. There's the correction, the self. Yeah? Of course, now, if someone, even a group of people, are ready to meet the Buddha, especially in this early period, in this kind of situation, it's very likely we say they are spiritually ready. This is the ripening of their past karma. In fact, later on there is another story which tells just that. In the past they have been cultivating their good karma. So, and they're very polite to the Buddha. They are probably intelligent young people also. So the leader replies, "Truly, Bhante, it were better for us that we should look for ourselves or ourselves." Okay? So here the Buddha kind of immediately asked them a very big question: which you think is better? I mean, here you're running around looking for this woman, or is it better for you to look for the self? So here we see two levels of speaking again, and you find these two levels very common in the suttas. Same thing with Angulimala. When the Buddha met Angulimala, Angulimala talks to the Buddha on the worldly language. He tells the Buddha to stop. Then the Buddha turns around and tells Angulimala, "I have stopped, but you're the one who have not stopped." So there you have two meanings of stop. One is in a worldly sense, the other is a spiritual sense. So that kind of suddenly brings this Angulimala, who is on a very violent path, to a higher level, which he is ready for. So he asked the Buddha, "What do you mean? What do you mean by saying stop? I have stopped. You're the one. I'm the one standing here, and you're the one running around. I can't catch up with you." Then the Buddha explains. The Buddha says, "Well, I have stopped killing. I've stopped violence, but you are still killing." And at once, Angulimala understood, and he became a stream winner, just like that. And here we have a similar situation. So when the young man replies it, of course, looking for the self is much better. The Buddha then says, "Okay, in that case, get ready. The Dharma, here is the Dharma. We will teach you the Dharma." "Well then, young man, sit down and I will teach you the Dharma." And then they say, "Yes, Bhante." Section 4. Then the Blessed One gave them a progressive talk. So here we see the Buddha giving them some simple teachings, beginning with giving or charity, moral virtue, the heavens. This kind of standard set. Of course, the Buddha could vary the teaching depending on the mentality, readiness of the audience. So the idea of this first part here, the progressive talk, is to calm the audience, to ready this group of young men. Further down you see the sutta says, when the Blessed One perceived that the listener's mind, notice the listener's mind, so this is a stock passage, it refers to any kind of audience. So the Buddha perceived that the listeners' minds were prepared, pliant, free from obstacles, uplifted and lucid. Then he explained to them the teaching peculiar to the Buddhas, that is to say, suffering, its arising, its cessation, and the path. In other words, the Four Noble Truths. So here we have the sort of complete teaching. First, the basic teachings to calm the mind, to clear the mind of distractions and the hindrances. And when the mind is calm and ready, the Buddha tells them the Four Noble Truths. And this is the really powerful teaching of suffering, arising of suffering, and so on. So you can imagine how the minds of the young men responded. The next line says, "Then just as a clean cloth without any black spots would easily be dyed, even so, as they sat right there on their seats, the dust-free, dirt-free Dharma eye arose in them thus: whatever is of the nature to arise, all that is of the nature to cease." Okay, this is a code, this is a kind of a stock passage telling us, yes, this group of people, or depending, there could be only one person listening, has attained at least stream winning, but not yet an arahat. This is the famous line, on the rise and fall of things. Right? Today, some of our modern teachers call this vipassana, this watching rise and fall. So this is the locus classicus. This is where we get the teaching from. So people ask you, where do you get all this idea about rising, falling? Well, this is one of the texts you can quote. So, section 5, they having seen the Dharma, attained the Dharma, understood the Dharma, plunged into the Dharma, having crossed over doubt. You see this phrase, having crossed over doubt, again, it confirms that they are at least stream winners. They have reached the path to awakening, towards awakening, in other words, the Eightfold Path. Gone beyond uncertainty, won spiritual confidence, who, independent of others, dwells in the teacher's teaching. And they said this to the Blessed One: "May we, Bhante, receive the going forth in the Blessed One's presence. May we receive the ordination." So they decide to become monks just like that, on the spot. So we're talking about the early days, we're talking about the Buddha going around and kind of harvesting the past karma of all these wonderful people who have been with him many, many lives before, and now they're ready, just at a moment's notice, just with the Buddha saying the right word, sometimes just looking at the Buddha, like in the case of Mahakassapa, he just looks at the Buddha and he says, okay, this is my teacher, just like that. So, since they're already stream winners, there is no need for any ceremony for them to become monks, because by the fact that they already became stream winners, they're also automatically members of the noble Sangha, Arya Sangha, the true noble community. So this is the natural level or status that the saints attain. So they form what's called the Arya Sangha. This is the Sangha that we take refuge in, that we reflect on as a kind of anusati, as a reflection, as our meditation. So they are in fact de facto monks. So all the Buddha need to say was admit them by what is called the Ehi Bhikkhu Upasampada. Ehi means come, Bhikkhave, monks. Okay, so the Buddha says, come bhikshus. Bhikshus is the English word for monks. Said the Blessed One, well taught is the Dharma. Live the holy life for the sake of ending suffering. Now here again, this is a very famous formula. Here is the full Ehi Bhikkhu formula, or the full Kam Bhikshu formula. Notice the second part of the sentence is, well taught is the Dharma, live the holy life. Live the holy life, that portion means this person who has been ordained is still not yet an arahat. So if this person is already an arahat, this last time will be omitted because he has lived the holy lives. So Buddha would not say this anymore. But in this case, they're only strict winners. So Buddha continues the line and says, live the holy life for the sake of ending suffering. So in other words, they have not fully ended their suffering yet. There are still other fetters that hold them. For example, some kind of views about jhanas, about existence. They still have restlessness and so on. So the last line in this story says, just this was the Venerable One's ordination. So that's the first part of the story. Then the Buddha goes his way, teaching others. And meantime, apparently, the next story, kathina anujanana, this is the allowance of kathina, how the robe offering was introduced. Probably this one is many years later when the Sangha was quite well established. By then, apparently these 30 monks have gone to Pawa, which is kind of further north in north central India. And the story here is that these monks, they are still together, the 30 of them. So let me just read to you the first part, section 1. Oh yeah, before that, the reference, okay? Kathina anujanana, the allowance of kathina. This is the passage on how the robe offering ceremony started. MV is Mahavagga, chapter 7, sections 1 to 3. This is located in the Vinaya, volume 1, page 253 and the following. How the kathina robe offering or robe giving was introduced. At that time, the Blessed One was staying in Anathapindika's park in Jeta's Grove outside Savatthi. So we know this where the Buddha was quite established in Savatthi. At that time, some 30 monks from Pawa, all forest dwellers, all alms-round goers, all users of dust heap cloth, all 3 robe wearers, were going to Savatthi to see the Blessed One for the entry into the rains retreat. But they were unable to reach in time. So they broke journey and entered the rains retreat at Saketa. So they couldn't make it in time. They have to kind of stop where they were in the town of Saketa, and they spent the rains retreat there for 3 months. Notice here, the sutta describes them as practicing 4 kinds of dhutanga, ascetic practices. They were all forest dwellers. In other words, they were not the normal community monks, and they depend on alms food. They go out every morning, collect food, and they use dust heap ropes. In other words, they collect little pieces of cast away cloth and they kind of stitch them together, and they make their own robes. And these are not very comfortable robes. They are kind of, it's an ascetic practice. So these 4 are very ancient practices. When the suttas are developed, we hear of 13 such practices, but here only 4 are mentioned. Okay, so they were not in time to meet the Buddha, so they spent their retreat, 3 months rains retreat in Saketa, which was not too far away from where they are living, but again they have to walk some distance. So the next line says, they spent the rains in a state of longing, thinking, they say, oh, the Buddha is so near, it's only 6 leagues away, 6 yojanas away. 1 yojana is about 7 miles, okay, so you can multiply that and you get, so they're thinking about the Buddha. They say, oh, if only we had been able to go to Savatthi, we could see the Buddha. So once the 3 months have ended, the rains retreat have ended, they at once left to see the Buddha. And then, but the thing is, it was still raining. There was still rain, and they couldn't wait, so they just moved on anyway. So they all were drenched, they were wet, and they reached Savatthi, and they met the Buddha, all drenched and bowing down to the Buddha. And the Buddha looked at them and said, well, we might say the Buddha was quite surprised. Oh, how did you get so wet? And then they told their story. And that's when the Buddha introduced this rule where they can accept robes from lay people during this time, after the rains retreat, so that they have new robes to change and they won't be kind of just wearing what they have, the 3 robes, and so that they stay more healthy, because if they get wet like that, they fall sick. So this is a story of how the robe offering was introduced. The Buddha allowed lay people to offer robes to the monks, and of course it became more elaborate over time. It became a kind of very special, quite a big ceremony for the Sangha. It's a kind of celebration to mark the end of the rains retreat, and lay people just love meeting, gathering together to offer all kinds of offerings. The main thing being the robes. This is called the kathina ceremony. So again, here we have the story related to the 30 young men. Now at this point, they're still not arahats yet. So we have another story. This time it's from the Dhammapada commentary. Now this story, from the commentaries, we often get a little bit extra kind of drama, and very often these stories will go back, will tell us what happened in some past life. So let's look at this story on page 102. Timsa means 30. Bhikkhu, the monks from Pava. Watu meaning story. Okay, so this DHA, this next line is the DHA, that's the Dhammapada commentary, 5.6, chapter 5, story 6. The theme here is even the bad can benefit from the Dharma if they accept it, so people can change. So here we see the background of this 30 young man. Now I'm going to summarize the story. We remember there's a story about when they first met the Buddha. These 30 young men were enjoying themselves in the park with their wives, and one with a social escort. So they were kind of living a life of rich abandon. They were kind of very luxurious and having sensual pleasures. So they go on to practice the strict rooms. They became monks and practiced the strict rooms, and but they're still not arahats yet. So the Buddha looked at them and said, well, they should be ready by now after a few years being monks. So the Buddha gave them a special teaching. The Buddha says, I'm going to teach them about the nature of samsara, the nature of this cycle of life and death, which is beginningless, without any beginning, without any end, if you're caught up with it. So the basic idea behind this story is to impress on people like us, on the later generations, that no matter what kind of life we lead, there is still this possibility to turn to the Dharma. The Dharma is still able to change us if we kind of open our heart to it, so to speak. This story recalls that the Buddha actually just gave the 30 young men a very short teaching, nothing elaborate. In fact, the teaching was not recorded at all. It's just Buddha, the sutta says the Buddha taught them something, and then they became strenuous, that's all. We're not told exactly what the Buddha taught them. There's no special sutta with a special title. In other words, what the Buddha told them is just something simple, something very short, but that changed their whole life. They became strenuous. So this story ends with a Dhammapada verse. In fact, this kind of story is kind of accompanies the Dhammapada verses. So this is from Dhammapada verse 65. It's on page 103. The Dhammapada verse goes, Muhutampi che vinyu panditang pairupa sati kippang dhammang vijanati juha suparasang ta. Even though the wise, for but a moment, associates with the wise, he quickly understands the Dharma just as the spoon tastes the soup. Or in a simple line, we well know, we say a word for the wise is sufficient, right? So this is the quatrain in the Dhammapada. So this story now brings us to the main sutta. The sutta, this is the title of this whole chapter, this Timsa Bhikkhu Sutta, S 15.13, page 103. Alright, so let me just read to you section 1 onwards. The Blessed One was reciting, in the bamboo grove at Rajagaha, then some 30 monks from Pava, all forest dwellers, all alms-round goers, all users of dusty robes, dusty cloth, all tree robes wearers, all still having fetters, approach the Blessed One. So the key phrase here is all still having fetters. In other words, they are not arahats yet. So they went up close to the Buddha, saluted the Buddha, and then sat down at one side. Then it occurred to the Blessed One. So in other words here, the Buddha sort of looked at the situation and said, well, these 30 young men, they've been monks for so long. They did not become arahats immediately. So now's the time. They probably have been monks for many years. We're not told how many. I suspect maybe more than 10 years. So, section 4, the Buddha says, what now if I were to teach them the Dharma in such a way so that their minds would be freed from the influxes through non-clinging, even while they are still on their very sins. So here the Buddha is saying it's time that they become arahats. To clear all their influxes away. Here influxes are refers to whatever enters through our sense, the six senses, and causes us to get caught up with this world, go on suffering. Things like views, wrong views, existence, ignorance. So these are the three kind of inflows, sometimes they call inflows. So the Buddha's instruction begins, again here's a very simple instruction, and this is the highlight of this whole study today. Section 5, then the Buddha addressed the monks, bhikshus. Bhante, the monks replied in lesson to the Blessed One. The Blessed One said this. Okay, the moment you hear this line, the teaching starts after that. With neither a beginning nor an ending, bhikshus, is this samsara, cycle of rebirths and rebirths. So here, no beginning, no ending. It's a loop. It goes on and on. Discernible, indiscernible is the first point of beings. We can never know when all this ignorance, all this suffering started. Roaming and wandering, shrouded in ignorance, fettered in craving. What do you think, bhikshus? Which is more? The flowing stream of blood that you have shed when you were beheaded, as you roam and wandered on through this long journey, this or the waters of the four great oceans? Right, so the Buddha answered, this is a meditative question. It is not an intellectual academic question. It's a kind of reflection, almost a rhetorical question, if you like. So the Buddha is saying, have you ever thought about this? If you imagine this, so many cycles of rebirth that you've gone through, and when you were caught as criminals, as robbers, or just the fact that you got punished and you got beheaded. Imagine the blood that flowed. It's much more than the water in the four great oceans. Now here, of course, we see a bit of hyperbole, very typical Indian text, basically saying the blood that has flowed from our bodies is really much more than all these waters you can imagine. The idea is to create this impression of the length of time we've been through, being born and dying and born and dying and so on. It's a long, long time. So this is, if we study literature, I understand that this is a dramatization of a very important truth which the Buddha wants to impress on this young man, well, not so young now, on these monks. So the monks reply in section 9, Bhante, as we understand the Dharma has stopped by the Blessed One, this flowing stream of blood, Bhante, that we have shed when we were beheaded, as we roam and wander through this long journey, this alone is more, but not the waters of the four great oceans. Right? So the idea is a reflection. Then you have different cycles here. You can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 cycles. So this kind of teaching are repetitions, and they're meant to be heard, not so much read. In other words, one of the best things you can do if you like this sort of teaching is to record them with a calm, slow voice and listen to this. And this helps you to get into your meditation. See, one of the problems with modern translations is that they tend to crunch this kind of translation. So there are lots of ellipses, in other words, etc. So we miss all those important parts here. So in this translation, we have put all those repetitive sections in italics. Anyway, I'm not going to read them here because of our time constraint. I'm just going to show you how it's done. So then the Buddha repeats the template. In other words, the whole the phrasing of the passage is repeated. Only the highlighted words, the bold prints are changed. Instead of beheaded as human beings, the Buddha says, of course, you were born as cows and you were killed and blood flowed, and then as buffaloes and then sheep. Section 14 is as goats. Section 15, next page, forest animals. Okay, here the word miga can mean forest animals, it also can mean deer. And 16 is chickens, 17 is pigs, 18 village raiding bandits, 19 highway bandits, and 20, the last one, bandits who violate the women of others. I suppose we can take this as a hint that all these different lives refer to those of the 30 monks themselves. So in other words, somehow their karma has ripened in their last life when the Buddha arose in this world. So can you imagine? I mean, here we're reading it in just a few minutes, but here they're listening to the Buddha. The Buddha's voice is calm and soothing, and the Buddha is telling them all these things. It might take probably at least an hour or more, and they're listening to these reflective words, and then something changes in their minds, in their meditative minds. One thing's for sure, when you hear such teachings, you settle down, you get a very calm, peaceful state, into a very meditative state where you don't think about anything else except what's before you. And then the mind totally clears. Remember, they were already stream winners. So it's very easy for the Buddha to teach them this next step to become arahats by reflection. So finally, section 21, the Buddha says, what is the reason for this? With neither a beginning nor an ending, bhikshus, is this samsara, cycle of rebirth and rebirth. Indiscernible is the first point of beings, roaming and wandering, shrouded in ignorance, fettered by craving. Notice there are two things here, ignorance, shrouds, craving, fetters. Alright? So these are the two things that kind of perpetuate suffering in samsara in our lives. So the Buddha says, well, look at this samsara, this cycle of life and death, there's no beginning. We move on and on, going through the same cycle again and again. 22, it is enough for wanting freedom. I mean, surely you would like to get out of this cycle. And the sutta ends there. Then we are told of the result, section 23. The Blessed One said this. So, Blessed One said this concludes the teaching. At the start also, the Buddha, we have this line, so it shows the beginning and the end of the actual teaching. The monks, joyful at heart, approve of the Blessed One's word. Now, while the exposition was being given, the minds of the 30 power monks were freed from the influxes through non-clinging. So they were able to kind of let go of all their defilements, and they became arahats. So here, of course, this story is interesting in the sense that we have something rare here, where we have these monks becoming arahats through listening, and this is something not common. In most of those other cases, the Buddha would teach the Dharma, teach the monks Dharma, then these monks will go into solitary retreat and meditate and then attain arahathood. So here is where, a rare case where we have the Buddha merely teaching, guiding them along. We are even given the method here, how it's done. So this is something we need to reflect on how this fit into all the other stories of the methods of awakening, that it is possible to use the teaching to change people. In other words, if it's properly done. In other words, listening to the Dharma can be helpful to us if we respect the Dharma, if we listen with full attention, and we go on reflecting the significance of the teaching, and go on to practice. We could attain some level while listening, if not after that, if we continue to practice. So that's the end of the study today. We'll close with a short reflection. As we listen to the Buddha's teaching, it helps to clear our minds so that we are at peace with ourselves and just let those words fill our consciousness. And as we reflect on the meaning of those teachings, something begins to change in our minds. You might say our karma begins to rearrange itself, so to speak, and ripen into this very wonderful state of understanding, of wisdom, of joy, so that we're able to let go of our hindrances and fetters, things which hold us back from opening up to awakening to true reality. Reflecting in this way is good karma. By the power of such good karma, may we be blessed with courage and wisdom to aspire to attain at least stream winning in this life itself, and also to the blessings of the three jewels and the various good deeds we have done. Let us send out our loving kindness to our loved ones and those who have been kind and supportive of us. May they be well, may they be happy. And also let us send out our loving kindness to all those people who are practicing the Dharma, struggling to understand the teachings, or even having difficulties with the teachings. May they see awakening, some understanding that liberates them in this life itself. May all beings be well and happy. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.